If you can handle this, it's yours." He mocked the trainer until he discovered he was a world champion. Michael Thompson had never felt as humiliated as he did at that moment, watching the young man in a white jumpsuit approach the sports car he had just pointed at with disdain. The situation had gotten out of control very quickly, and now he felt the weight of all the driving school employees' eyes on him. "If you can handle this properly, you can take it home," Michael had said just a few minutes earlier, laughing loudly so everyone could hear. "But I seriously doubt someone like you even knows how to start the engine." The man standing before him initially said nothing, just observed the vehicle with a calm expression that irritated Michael even more. How dare this kid show up at his driving school wearing a pilot's jumpsuit as if he were some kind of professional? It was obvious it was a cheap costume, probably bought at some department store. "What was your name again?" asked Michael, crossing his arms and trying to maintain the superior tone he always used with new students. "Ryan Mitchell," the young man replied calmly, without taking his eyes off the car. "And I accept the challenge." Michael felt a chill in his stomach, but he had already said too much in front of everyone. He couldn't back out now. The driving school secretary, Mrs. Jenkins, discreetly approached him and whispered something he couldn't quite hear over the noise of the other vehicles in the training yard. "What is it, Linda? Speak up," said Michael, annoyed. "It's nothing, Mr. Thompson. I just thought you should know that." "It's nothing. Let the kid try. It'll be fun to watch him make a fool of himself," Michael interrupted, gesturing for Ryan to approach the vehicle. The driving school was located in a complex in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, and was considered one of the most prestigious in the area. Michael had invested everything he had to build the business, buying luxury cars and hiring experienced instructors. He prided himself on serving only clients who could pay for the best, and he wasn't willing to accept just anyone who showed up. The car in question was an imported sports model, one of Michael's favorites. He had bought the vehicle specifically to attract wealthy clients, but he rarely allowed anyone to drive it. In fact, this was the first time he had offered the car as a prize in a bet, and he only did it because he was absolutely certain Ryan would fail miserably. "Are you sure you want to try?" Michael asked one last time, still hoping Ryan would back down. "This car is no joke. It costs more than you probably make in 5 years. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he approached the vehicle and began examining it in a way that caught Michael's attention. The young man ran his hand over the bodywork, with a care that seemed professional, checked the tires and looked under the car as if searching for something specific. "What are you doing down there?" asked Michael, starting to feel uneasy with the familiarity Ryan showed with the vehicle. "Just making sure everything is in order," Ryan replied, standing up and wiping his hands on a cloth he took from his jumpsuit pocket. "These cars have a few sensitive points that need to be checked before any intense driving." Michael felt a shiver. How did this kid know that? He himself had only discovered those technical details after months of researching the model. Maybe Ryan was a mechanic or something. That would explain the jumpsuit and technical knowledge, but it didn't change the fact that he had probably never driven a car of that caliber. "All right, enough stalling," said Michael, taking the keys from his pocket and tossing them to Ryan. "Let's see if you're really good, or if it's all talk." Ryan caught the keys in midair with a fluid motion that impressed some of the watching employees. He opened the car door and settled into the driver's seat with a naturalness that made Michael swallow hard. There was something about Ryan's posture that didn't match the image of an amateur. Before starting the engine, Ryan adjusted the mirrors with mathematical precision. Every movement was calculated, as if he were following a mental protocol he had perfectly mastered. Michael watched every detail, trying to find signs of nervousness or insecurity, but found none. "What's the route?" asked Ryan, starting the engine smoothly. "Go to the end of the track, go around the cones and come back. Simple as that," replied Michael, pointing to the circuit he had set up for advanced tests. What Michael didn't mention was that he himself had designed that route to be especially difficult. Several experienced students had already tried to complete it without success, and he was sure Ryan would be no different. The turns were tight, the cones were positioned to require millimeter precision, and there was a section where the driver needed to accelerate and brake in quick succession. Ryan nodded and set the car in motion. In the first few meters, he maintained a moderate speed, as if studying the terrain. Michael relaxed a little, thinking that maybe the guy was indeed too cautious to try anything risky. But when Ryan reached the first turn, everything changed. The car slid through the turn with a smoothness that left everyone present speechless. It wasn't just a well-executed turn. It was a demonstration of pure technique. The vehicle obeyed Ryan's every command as if they were one, and the speed increased gradually without any sign of loss of control. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Michael felt his legs tremble. He himself had tried to take that turn several times and had never managed to execute it with such perfection. There was something in the way Ryan controlled the steering wheel that revealed years of experience, far more than any ordinary person could have. "My God," whispered Linda, who was standing next to Michael. "Who is this kid?" "I don't know," admitted Michael, unable to take his eyes off the car. "But he's not an amateur, that much I'm sure of." The second turn was even more impressive. Ryan executed a braking technique that Michael immediately recognized from the racing shows he watched on TV. It was the kind of maneuver only professional drivers could perform, requiring perfect coordination between brake, accelerator, and steering. "Mr. Thompson," called Joe, one of the driving school's mechanics, approaching with a look of astonishment. "I know that technique. I've seen it in the races on the sports channel." "What do you mean?" asked Michael, unable to hide the nervousness in his voice. "That way of braking before the turn and accelerating on the exit. That's not something you learn in a regular driving school. That's professional driver stuff." Michael felt a weight in his stomach. If Joe was right, he had just made a bet he couldn't afford to lose. The car cost a fortune, and losing it would mean the financial ruin of the driving school. But more than that, it would mean public humiliation in front of all the employees and clients. Ryan continued the course with a confidence that grew with each second. On the third turn, one of the most difficult on the circuit, he executed a maneuver that drew spontaneous applause from the employees. The car passed through the cones with inches to spare, maintaining a speed that seemed impossible for that space. "This isn't normal," Michael murmured to himself. "It's not possible." Linda approached him again, this time with a worried expression on her face. She was holding her cell phone in her hand, as if she had just seen something important on the screen. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you," she said, urgency in her voice. "Not now, Linda. I'm trying to understand what's happening here." "That's exactly what I want to talk about," insisted Linda. I recognized his name, Ryan Mitchell. I knew I had heard it somewhere before. Michael turned to her with a desperate expression. "What did you find out?" Linda showed him the cell phone screen. It was a news article with a photo of Ryan on a podium, holding a trophy. The article's headline was clear: "Ryan Mitchell wins his third consecutive world title." The world stopped for Michael at that moment. He read the article quickly, discovering that Ryan wasn't just a professional driver, but one of the most successful in the world. He had won titles in different categories and was considered a prodigy behind the wheel. "But what is he doing here?" asked Michael. His voice choked. "The article says he announced a break from his career last year," explained Linda. "No one really knew the reason." Meanwhile, Ryan continued the course as if it were a walk in the park. He had completed more than half of the circuit, and every maneuver was a lesson in driving. Other employees of the driving school began to crowd around to watch the spectacle, and some were already whispering among themselves about the driver's identity. Michael felt a mixture of fascination and terror. On one hand, he was witnessing a display of skill like he had never seen before. On the other hand, he knew he was about to lose one of the driving school's most valuable assets to a complete stranger. "Are you sure it's really him?" asked Michael, still trying to find a way out. Linda showed more photos on the internet. There was no possible doubt. The man driving the car was indeed Ryan Mitchell, the world champion. The photos showed the exact same face, the same confident posture, even the same white racing suit he was wearing. "Look at this one," said Linda, showing a photo of Ryan celebrating a victory. "It's him, Mr. Thompson. There's no mistaking it." Michael watched Ryan execute the final sequence of turns with an elegance that left him speechless. The car responded to every command as if it were an extension of the driver's body, and the final speed was so high that some employees screamed in fright. When Ryan crossed the finish line and began to slow down, the silence in the driving school's yard was total. Everyone was processing what they had just witnessed. It wasn't just a well-executed lap, it was a masterful demonstration of driving that could easily be compared to the best professional races. Ryan parked the car in exactly the same position he had taken it from and turned off the engine. He got out of the vehicle with the same calmness with which he had entered, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The silence continued for a few seconds until someone started to applaud. "Unbelievable," said Joe, shaking his head. "In 30 years of working with cars, I've never seen anything like it." Ryan approached Michael, taking off his gloves and carrying his helmet under his arm. His expression was serene, almost indifferent, as if that display of skill were routine for him. "So," said Ryan, extending the car keys to Michael. "Did I pass the test?" Michael stared at the keys, unable to take them. His hands were visibly trembling, and he felt as if the world had been turned upside down. Everything he thought he knew about driving had been questioned in the last few minutes. You're really him, aren't you?" Michael managed to ask, his voice hoarse. "Who?" asked Ryan, genuinely curious. "Ryan Mitchell, the world champion." Ryan smiled for the first time since he had arrived. It was a sad smile, as if the mention of his success brought back painful memories. "I was," he said simply. "Today I'm just someone who needs to learn how to drive normally." The answer confused Michael even more. What did he mean a world champion needed to learn how to drive? It made no sense. A man capable of driving like Ryan had just done certainly knew how to handle any vehicle. "I don't understand," said Michael. "You just gave us all a masterclass in driving. How can you need to learn to drive?" Ryan looked at the sports car and then at the driving school's parking lot. There was a melancholy in his eyes that contrasted with the confidence he had shown during the drive. "Because I only know how to go fast," explained Ryan. "I learned to drive for racing, for competing, for winning. But I never learned to drive slowly, carefully, thinking about the safety of the person next to me." "And why do you want to learn that now?" asked Linda, who had approached the group. Ryan hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much he should reveal. Finally, he sighed and looked directly at Michael. "Because of my wife," he said. "She needs me now, and I want to be present. But to do that, I need to stop being the driver I was and learn to be the husband she deserves." The revelation created a silence heavy with emotion. Everyone present realized there was a deep story behind that unexpected visit. Ryan wasn't there to show off or to humiliate anyone. He was there out of necessity, driven by something far more important than any competition. Michael felt a wave of shame as he remembered how he had treated Ryan at the beginning. His arrogance and prejudice had almost made him miss the opportunity to meet one of the most talented people he had ever encountered. More than that, he had judged Ryan by his appearance and the fact that he didn't seem to belong in that elite environment. "I'm sorry," Michael said, finally managing to articulate the words. "I was an idiot. I shouldn't have treated you that way." "You don't need to apologize," replied Ryan. "I understand. My appearance isn't exactly what you'd expect to find at a luxury driving school. But still, it was rude of me. And about the bet." Ryan shook his head. "I didn't come here to win your car. I came because I genuinely need lessons. I can pay the normal price, no problem." "No way," Michael said immediately. "After what you just did, the lessons are on me. It's the least I can do to make up for my rudeness." Ryan seemed genuinely surprised by the offer. "It's not necessary. I can pay." "I know you can. But I want to do this. It's not about money. It's about respect." As they talked, other employees of the driving school discreetly approached. Everyone wanted to meet the world champion who had appeared out of nowhere to teach them all a lesson in humility. Joe the mechanic was particularly excited. "Can I ask a question?" Joe said, addressing Ryan. "How do you stay so calm at those speeds? I got nervous just watching." Ryan smiled, this time more naturally. "It's a matter of practice. When you do the same thing thousands of times, your body learns to react automatically. The problem is when you want to do things differently." "What do you mean?" asked Linda. "I trained my body and my mind to always seek the limit, always the maximum performance. Now I need to train myself to do the opposite, Go slow, be cautious, think about safety before speed. The explanation revealed an internal conflict that no one had considered. For most people, knowing how to race well was synonymous with knowing how to drive well, but Ryan was facing the challenge of reprogramming reflexes that had been developed over years of high-level competition. "And your wife?" Linda asked delicately. "If it's not too personal, what happened?" Ryan looked at the horizon before answering. It was clear the subject was painful for him, but he seemed to decide it was okay to share. "She has cancer," he said simply. "We found out 6 months ago. The treatment is tough and she needs to go to the hospital 3 times a week. I want to take her personally, but I can't drive like a racer. I need to drive like a husband." The revelation brought tears to Linda's eyes and created an atmosphere of deep respect. No one knew what to say in the face of such a delicate situation. Ryan had given up a brilliant career to care for the person he loved, and was facing the challenge of relearning something he had mastered in a different way. "Is that why you stopped racing?" Michael asked, his voice choked up. "Yes, the moment she got the diagnosis, I knew racing was over for me, at least for now. Maybe forever, I don't know. What matters is that she needs me, and I'm going to be there for her." Michael felt a deep admiration for Ryan. He knew many rich and powerful men who attended his driving school, but none of them had demonstrated the kind of character Ryan was showing. Dropping everything at the peak of his career to care for his sick wife was something few would do. "How long have you been married?" Linda asked. 12 years, Ryan replied, and for the first time, his face lit up with a genuine smile. "She was with me even before I became a professional racer. She put up with all the training, all the travel, all the nights I came home exhausted. Now it's my turn to take care of her." "What's her name?" Joe asked. "Emma. Emma Mitchell." The name left Ryan's lips with a tenderness that touched the hearts of everyone present. It was clear the love between them was deep and true, and that Ryan was genuinely willing to make any sacrifice necessary for his wife's well-being. "And does she support your decision to stop racing?" Michael asked. Ryan shook his head. "Actually, she didn't want me to stop. She said she could manage on her own, that I didn't need to give up my dreams because of her. But I don't see it that way. She isn't an obstacle to my dreams, she is my dream." The phrase deeply moved Michael, who had been married for 25 years and knew how difficult it was to maintain a solid relationship. He had often prioritized work and business to the detriment of his family, and now wondered if he had missed important moments with his own wife. "Do you have children?" Linda asked. "We couldn't," Ryan replied, and for the first time his voice showed a deep sadness. "We tried for years, did several treatments, but it didn't work out. Emma always said it didn't matter, that the two of us were already a complete family, but I know she suffered a lot because of it." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It's a huge help for us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, the revelation added another layer of complexity to the story of Ryan and Emma. They had faced the pain of infertility together and were now facing a new battle against cancer. The strength of their relationship was evident, but it was also possible to see the emotional weight they both carried. "And now, with the treatment, how are you handling it?" asked Michael delicately. "One day at a time," replied Ryan. "The doctors are optimistic. They say the prognosis is good if the treatment is followed correctly, but it's draining, both for her and for me. That's why I want to be able to take her to the appointments myself. I don't trust anyone else to take care of her right now." Michael understood Ryan's concern perfectly. In critical situations like that, the presence of a loved one could make all the difference in the recovery process. The fact that Ryan wanted to learn to drive carefully showed how willing he was to adapt to offer the best possible care to his wife. "How many times a week does she need to go to the hospital?" asked Joe. 3 times, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. They're chemotherapy sessions that last about 4 hours each. I stay with her the whole time, and then I take her home. The problem is that the hospital is downtown, in the middle of heavy traffic." "And you've never driven in normal traffic?" asked Linda, surprised. Ryan shook his head. "I've always had a private driver or used a taxi. When I needed to get around by myself, I went by motorcycle, which is easier to maneuver. But now I need a car for her comfort, And I need to drive safely, not like I'm on a racetrack. The situation was truly unique. One of the most skilled drivers in the world was facing the challenge of driving like an ordinary person, prioritizing safety and comfort over speed and performance. It was a radical shift in mindset that required much more than just technical skill. "Can I ask a personal question?" said Michael. "Why did you specifically choose our driving school? There are other options in the city." Ryan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Actually, I did a lot of research before coming here. Your driving school has an excellent reputation, and I read that you work with luxury cars. I thought that would mean the instructors would be more experienced, and also because it's close to the hospital where Emma gets her treatment," added Ryan. "I thought it would be more practical to learn to drive in the same area where I'll be driving frequently." The explanation made sense, but Michael sensed there was something more to Ryan's choice. Maybe he knew about the driving school's reputation for excellence, or maybe he had other reasons for being there. Either way, Michael was determined to offer the best possible training. "When would you like to start the lesson?" asked Michael. "As soon as possible," replied Ryan. "Emma starts a new treatment cycle next week, and I'd like to be prepared to take her. Tomorrow, if you want. I can reserve the entire afternoon slot for you." Ryan seemed genuinely grateful for the offer. "That would be perfect. Thank you very much." As they finalized the details, Linda approached Michael and whispered something in his ear. She had remembered something important that could complicate the situation. "Mr. Thompson, did you remember that tomorrow afternoon we have that evaluation from the regulatory agency? The inspector will be here to check our procedures." Michael had completely forgotten about the visit. Every month an inspector came to the driving school to verify if the procedures were being followed correctly. It was a routine visit, but it required some preparation and special care. "That's right," said Michael. "Ryan, maybe it's better to reschedule for another day. Tomorrow won't be ideal." "Is there a problem?" asked Ryan. Michael quickly explained about the inspector's visit. Ryan listened attentively and then made an unexpected proposal. "If it helps, I can pretend to be a regular student during the visit. It might even be a good opportunity for me to practice basic driving while you do the demonstration." "You would do that?" asked Michael, surprised. "Of course, after all, I really need the basic lessons. And maybe it would be interesting for the inspector to see a student who is learning from scratch." Linda and Michael exchanged looks. Ryan's presence during the evaluation could really be beneficial. The cooperative and respectful student always made a good impression on the inspectors. The problem was keeping Ryan's true identity a secret. "Are you sure it won't be a problem for you?" asked Linda. "No problem at all. In fact, I think it will be an interesting experience for me too." They agreed then that Ryan would arrive the next day at 2 in the afternoon, an hour before the inspector's scheduled arrival. This would allow time for a brief orientation about the basic procedures of the driving school and would let Ryan get familiar with the cars used in the regular lessons. "Just one thing," said Michael. "Would you have any problem using a simpler car?" "I can't use the sports car during the evaluation." Ryan laughed. "I need to learn how to drive normal cars anyway. The simpler, the better for my training." When Ryan left, the driving school's lot was silent for a few minutes. Everyone was still processing what had happened. The unexpected arrival of a world champion had turned a routine afternoon into something extraordinary. "I still can't believe what happened," said Joe, shaking his head. "A guy like that shows up out of nowhere, and on top of that, he's humble." "And the most impressive thing is the reason why he's here," commented Linda. "To drop everything to take care of his sick wife. Now that's true love." Michael was thoughtful for a while. The encounter with Ryan had affected him in several ways. First, he had felt humiliated by his own arrogance and prejudice. Then, he had been impressed by Ryan's exceptional skill. But what touched him the most was the driver's personal story. "Linda," Michael finally said, "do you think I'm a good husband?" The question took Linda by surprise. "Why are you asking that?" After hearing Ryan's story, I got to thinking, when was the last time I prioritized my family over work? When was the last time I really took care of my wife? Linda had known Michael for over 10 years and knew he was a man dedicated to his work. She also knew he loved his family, but that he often let business consume all his time and energy. You're a good man, Mr. Thompson, but maybe Ryan has shown that there's always room for improvement. That's exactly what I'm thinking, admitted Michael. That young man gave me a priceless lesson. That night, Michael got home earlier than usual. His wife, Claire, found the change in routine odd, but was happy to have her husband present for the family dinner. They had 2 teenage children who usually ate dinner alone due to Michael's work schedule. During dinner, Michael told the family about the encounter with Ryan, omitting only the details about the driver's identity. He was more interested in sharing the lesson he had learned about life's priorities. "Dad, are you okay?" asked Sophie, his 16-year-old daughter. "You seem different today." "I'm great, honey. I'm just thinking about some things." "What kind of things?" asked Claire, sensing that something had really changed in her husband's behavior. Michael thought about how to explain without revealing confidential details. "I met a man today who made me rethink some priorities. He's going through a tough time with his wife, and the way he's handling the situation impressed me." "What happened to his wife?" asked Richard, the youngest son. "She's sick, and he dropped everything to take care of her. It made me realize how important family is." Claire looked at her husband with an expression of surprise and affection. It was rare to see him talk about feelings and relationships with such depth. Usually their conversations at home revolved around business and the problems at the driving school. "And are you thinking of making any changes?" asked Claire delicately. "I'm thinking about spending more time at home," replied Michael. "Maybe hire someone to help me at the driving school, so I don't have to work so many hours." "Really, Dad?" said Sophie excitedly. "It would be great to have you around more." "Why did I never think of this before?" questioned Michael, more to himself than to the family. "Because you always thought you needed to do everything by yourself," replied Claire. "But maybe it's time to trust the people around you more." The conversation continued for over an hour, something that hadn't happened in months at the Thompson house. The children shared things about school they normally wouldn't tell, and Claire talked about her own dreams and plans that she had set aside to support her husband's career. "You know, I always wanted to go back to work, right?" said Claire at one point. Michael stopped eating and looked at his wife attentively. "Work where?" "In the education field. Before we got married, I was specializing in pedagogy. I always thought about going back when the kids got older." "And why did you never tell me about this?" "I did a few times, but you were always worried about the driving school. I ended up giving up on the idea." Michael felt a pang of guilt. How had he missed such important information about his own wife's dreams? Ryan's example was showing him how much he had distanced himself from the people who really mattered. "If you want to go back to studying, I support you completely," said Michael. "We can hire someone to help at home if necessary." "Are you sure?" asked Claire, her eyes shining. "I'm sure. In fact, I think I should have encouraged this a long time ago." The rest of the evening was special for the Thompson family. They made plans, talked about dreams that had been forgotten, and Michael rediscovered himself as a father and husband, all because of the unexpected encounter with Ryan Mitchell. The next day, Michael arrived at the driving school with a different disposition. He had slept well and woken up wanting to work, but also with a new sense of balance. He was eager to see Ryan again and start the promised lessons. "Good morning, Mr. Michael," greeted Linda. "You look radiant today." "I slept well last night. And you? Did you prepare everything for the inspector's visit?" "All ready. The cars have been serviced, the documents are organized, and I've reserved the most experienced instructor for the demonstration." "And Ryan? Has he confirmed he's coming?" "He called a little while ago. He arrives at 2 o'clock sharp." Michael felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity. He was genuinely interested in teaching Ryan to drive in a conventional way, but he was also curious to learn more about his personal story. There was something about the way Ryan talked about his wife that intrigued him. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ryan arrived punctually. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a polo shirt, and looked like a completely different person from the imposing figure who had driven the sports car the day before. Without the racing suit, he could easily pass for a regular client of the driving school. "Good afternoon," greeted Ryan. "How are the preparations for the evaluation?" All organized, replied Michael. Are you sure you want to participate as a regular student? I'm sure. It will be a good experience for me. Linda approached with a clipboard containing the usual forms. Ryan, you need to fill out these documents before we begin. Ryan filled out the forms without rushing, answering the basic questions about previous experience and goals for the lessons. When he got to the part about profession, he hesitated for a moment before simply writing self-employed. All done, said Ryan, handing back the clipboard. What do we do now? First, I'll show you the car we'll be using, said Michael. It's a basic model, very different from what you drove yesterday. They walked over to a compact car parked at the start of the training track. It was a simple vehicle with a manual transmission and no advanced technological features. Ryan examined the car with the same attention he had shown the sports car. Interesting, commented Ryan. It's been a while since I've seen such a simple car. It's intentional, explained Michael. Someone who learns to drive in a basic car can drive anything afterwards. The opposite isn't always true. That makes sense. And what's the plan for today's lesson? We'll start with the basics: seating position, mirror adjustment, pedal usage. Then we'll move on to simple maneuvers at low speed. Ryan nodded and got into the car. Michael settled into the passenger seat, watching as Ryan familiarized himself with the controls. It was fascinating to see how such an experienced driver approached a simple vehicle with the same seriousness he would dedicate to a race car. The clutch is heavier than I expected, commented Ryan. That's normal in driving school cars. They're calibrated to be safer, not more comfortable. Ryan made a few test movements with the pedals, getting used to the different sensitivity. It was evident that he was adapting quickly, but also that he was making a conscious effort not to apply his racing reflexes. Now let's start the engine and do some basic exercises, said Michael. Ryan started the car smoothly and set it in motion. For the first few meters, he maintained an extremely low speed, almost exaggeratedly so. Michael realized he was forcing himself to go slow, fighting his natural instincts. You can speed up a little, said Michael. You don't need to go that slow. Sorry, replied Ryan. I'm still getting used to it. My body wants to go faster automatically. It's an interesting challenge. Most students have trouble controlling the car. You have trouble controlling yourself. Ryan laughed, a genuine sound that showed how much he was enjoying the unusual situation. I'd never thought of it that way, but that's exactly it. They spent half an hour practicing basic maneuvers. Ryan executed everything perfectly from a technical standpoint, but Michael could see the mental effort he was making to keep the speed low and the movements smooth. It was like watching a virtuoso pianist play a simple piece, technically perfect, but clearly restrained. How do you feel? Asked Michael during a break. It's harder than I imagined, admitted Ryan. Not technically, but mentally. It's like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. It will get better with practice. The important thing is for you to understand that driving in normal traffic is a different skill from racing on a track. I understand perfectly, and I appreciate your patience. At 3 o'clock, Linda appeared in the yard to announce that the inspector had arrived. Michael and Ryan got out of the car and went to the reception, where a middle-aged man, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase, was waiting for them. Good afternoon, greeted the inspector. I'm Charles Miller from the Regulation Department. I'm here for the monthly evaluation. Good afternoon, Charles, replied Michael. Everything is ready for your visit. This is Ryan, one of our students. Ryan greeted the inspector politely, showing no signs of nervousness. Charles seemed pleased to find a student actively participating during his visit. How long have you been taking lessons? Charles asked Ryan. I just started today, Ryan replied honestly. This is my first practical lesson. And how has the experience been so far? Very good. The instructor is excellent and the method is very easy to follow. Charles seemed satisfied with the answer and turned to Michael. Shall we begin the evaluation? I'd like to observe a practical lesson in progress. Of course, Michael replied. Ryan, would you mind continuing the lesson while Mr. Charles observes? No problem, said Ryan. The three of them headed back to the training area. Charles positioned himself to get a good view of the exercise, while Michael and Ryan returned to the car. The inspector took a clipboard from his bag and began taking notes on the procedures he observed. "Let's do the parallel parking exercise," Michael told Ryan. "It's one of the items the inspector always evaluates." Ryan nodded and drove to the marked area for the exercise. It was a maneuver he had briefly practiced in the previous lesson, but it still required concentration to perform at the correct speed. "Remember," said Michael, "slow and careful. There's no rush." Ryan began the maneuver with deliberately slow movements. Each steering adjustment was made with exaggerated care, and he checked the mirrors frequently. It was almost comical to see such precision applied at such a low speed. Charles watched attentively, taking constant notes. He seemed pleased with the methodology applied by Michael and with Ryan's respectful demeanor. The maneuver was executed perfectly, meeting all the parameters required by the regulations. "Very good," said Charles, approaching the car. "May I ask the student a few questions?" "Of course," Michael replied. Charles addressed Ryan. "How would you rate the quality of the instruction you're receiving?" "Excellent," Ryan replied. "The instructor is patient, explains everything clearly, and adapts the teaching to the student's needs." "And do you feel safe during the lessons?" "Completely. All safety procedures are strictly followed." "Do you have any suggestions for improvement for the driving school?" Ryan thought for a moment before answering. "Honestly, no. So far, everything has been perfect. My only comment might be that it would be nice to have more scheduling options for people who work, but that's a minor point." Charles seemed impressed with the maturity of the response. He made a few more notes and then turned to Michael to discuss other aspects of the evaluation. They spent about an hour reviewing documents, checking equipment, and observing other instructors in action. Throughout the process, Ryan remained available to answer questions and participate in demonstrations when asked. His presence definitely contributed to a positive evaluation of the driving school. Charles was particularly impressed with the students' politeness and commitment. "Well," Charles finally said, "I can tell you in advance that the evaluation was very positive. All procedures are being followed correctly, and it's evident that you maintain a high standard of quality." "Thank you very much," replied Michael, visibly relieved. "And congratulations on the quality of your students," Charles added, looking at Ryan. "It's rare to find a student so committed and respectful." "The credit goes entirely to the instructor," said Ryan. "He makes learning much easier." Charles finished filling out his forms and said goodbye to everyone. After he left, Michael and Ryan were alone in the driving school's lot. There was a feeling of a mission accomplished in the air. "Thank you for participating in the evaluation," said Michael. "Your presence really helped." "It was my pleasure, and it was useful for me too." "I learned a lot about how to be a model student," Ryan joked. "Now we can continue your real lesson. How did you feel driving so slowly for so long?" "Mentally tiring but rewarding. I'm starting to understand the difference between racing and driving." They got back in the car for a final training session. This time, Michael focused on teaching Ryan specific techniques for city traffic: how to keep a safe distance, how to react to careless pedestrians, how to deal with aggressive drivers. "The traffic here in Los Angeles can be chaotic," Michael explained. "You need to be prepared for unexpected situations." "I can imagine. In races, at least everyone follows the same basic rules." "Exactly. In normal traffic, you'll find people who don't respect any rules." Ryan practiced various simulated situations, from sudden braking to swerving around obstacles. In all of them, he demonstrated excellent reflexes, but Michael constantly encouraged him to prioritize safety over speed. "Your next lesson will be in real traffic," Michael said. "We'll leave the driving school and drive around the streets in the area." "Am I ready for that already?" asked Ryan. "Technically, yes. You have more skill in one afternoon than most students develop in months. The challenge will be psychological." "How so?" "You'll need to control the anxiety of being among other cars, pedestrians, traffic lights. It's a very different environment from a controlled track." Ryan nodded, understanding the complexity of the challenge. "When can we do it?" "Tomorrow if you want. Same time." "Perfect. And Michael, can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure." "Do you have a family?" Michael smiled. "I do. A wife and 2 teenage kids." "Why do you ask?" "Yesterday, When I talked about my situation, I noticed you became thoughtful. I wanted to know if my words made you reflect on something. The question took Michael by surprise. He hadn't expected Ryan to be so observant, or to care about the impact of his story on others. To tell you the truth, yes, Michael admitted. Your story made me rethink some priorities. Yesterday was the first time in months that I had dinner at home with my family. And how was it? Eye-opening. I found out my wife has dreams I didn't even know existed. I found out my kids miss me more than I imagined. Ryan nodded understandingly. It's funny how sometimes we need an extreme situation to realize what really matters. It's true. And you? How are you handling all of this? It must be very difficult to see your wife going through treatment. Ryan was silent for a moment, looking at the horizon. It's the hardest thing I've ever faced in my life. In racing, I had control over my performance. I could train more, study more, prepare better. Now I feel like I can't do anything except be present. But being present is very important. I know. Emma always says that. She says my presence is the most powerful medicine she has. And do you believe that? I'm learning to believe it. It's hard for someone like me, who was used to solving everything with action and speed, to accept that sometimes the best thing to do is simply to be there. The conversation was getting deep, and Michael felt a genuine connection forming with Ryan. There was something about the driver's honesty and vulnerability that touched him deeply. "Can I ask a personal question?" Michael said. "Sure." "Do you miss racing?" Ryan thought carefully before answering. "I do. It's hard not to. It was my life for over 15 years. But I don't regret the decision. If I had to choose again, I'd do the same thing." "And in the future? Do you plan on going back?" "I don't know. It depends on many things. On the outcome of Emma's treatment, on how she feels, on how I feel. For now, I'm living one day at a time." "That must be very distressing for someone used to planning everything." "Yeah. In racing, I always had a detailed plan for every stage of the season. Now my biggest plan is to get my wife to the hospital safely next Monday." The simplicity of Ryan's answer touched Michael deeply. How was it possible that someone with so much talent and success had reduced his ambitions to something so basic and yet so important? "Ryan," Michael finally said, "I really admire your attitude. I don't know many men who would do what you're doing." "Thank you, but honestly, I don't see it as heroism. It's just love. When you truly love someone, these choices become obvious." "Maybe you're right. Maybe I was the one who complicated things too much." They finished the lesson and scheduled the time for the next day. When Ryan left, Michael stayed in the driving school's courtyard for a few minutes, reflecting on the conversation they had. Every encounter with Ryan was a life lesson, and he was beginning to realize how much he could learn from that extraordinary man. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. That night, Michael again came home earlier. This time he had stopped on the way to buy flowers for Claire and a small gift for each of the kids. There was no special occasion, just an impulse to show affection for his family. "What happened?" asked Claire, smiling as she received the flowers. "Did I forget an important date?" "You didn't forget anything. I just wanted to give a gift to the most important woman in my life." Sophie and Richard appeared in the living room upon hearing the conversation, curious about the sudden change in their father's behavior. Michael handed over the gifts, a book for Sophie and a game for Richard, and sat with his family in the living room. "Dad, you've been acting very strange lately," said Sophie, laughing. "But it's a good kind of strange." "Why strange? You're more present, more affectionate. It's like you're a different person." Michael reflected on his daughter's comment. It was true that he was changing, and the change was becoming visible to everyone around him. The encounter with Ryan had triggered a transformation he didn't even know he needed. "Maybe I'm realizing what really matters in life," said Michael. "And what matters?" asked Richard. "You. This family. The moments we spend together." Claire moved closer to her husband and held his hand. "You always knew that. You just needed to remember. That's true, and I'm remembering thanks to a very special person I met. The man from the driving school you talked about yesterday? Asked Claire. Exactly. He showed me that professional success is worthless if you have no one to share it with. The family spent the rest of the evening talking, playing cards, and watching a movie together. It was a simple plan, but one that hadn't happened in months at the Thompson household. Michael felt as if he had rediscovered a treasure that had been right in front of him all along. The next day, Ryan arrived at the driving school promptly for his second lesson. This time, Michael had prepared a specific route for navigating city traffic. They would leave the driving school and travel along the main roads of the area, including the route to the hospital where Emma was receiving treatment. "Good morning," Ryan greeted. "How are you feeling today?" "Great. And you?" "Excited to face real traffic. A little nervous, to be honest. It's a different kind of adrenaline than what I'm used to." They headed to the car that would be used for the lesson. Michael had chosen an intermediate model, more comfortable than the one used the day before, but still simple and reliable. "Today we're going to do the full route to the hospital," said Michael. "I want you to get familiar with all the streets and any potential difficulties along the way." "That's a great idea. Emma has her session on Monday, and I'd like to be prepared." They left the driving school and entered the traffic of Beverly Hills. Ryan drove with extreme care, maintaining a conservative speed and constantly checking the mirrors. Michael observed his every reaction to the traffic situations. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked after a few minutes. "It's more intense than I expected," replied Ryan. "On the track, you know what to expect. Here, anything can happen at any moment." "Exactly, and that's why constant attention is crucial." They faced several typical situations of Los Angeles traffic: drivers changing lanes without signaling, pedestrians jaywalking, cyclists appearing out of nowhere. In every situation, Ryan reacted calmly and confidently, applying the techniques he had learned. "You're doing very well," said Michael. "Your ability to concentrate is impressive. It's the result of years of training. The difference is that now I'm applying that concentration to go slow instead of fast. And it's working perfectly." When they arrived at the hospital, Ryan parked the car precisely and turned to Michael with a satisfied smile. "I did it," he said. "For the first time in months, I feel confident driving here. And you should. You were impeccable the entire way." Ryan looked at the hospital building with a melancholic expression. "Emma is going to be so happy when she finds out I managed it. She was worried I'd never be able to adapt to normal driving." "Why was she worried?" "Because she knows me well. She knows I have a hard time with changes, especially when they involve slowing things down." "And now?" "Now she'll see that I can change when it's important." They made their way back to the driving school, this time taking different streets so Ryan could learn alternative routes. During the trip, Michael took the opportunity to teach specific techniques for different types of situations. "If you hit heavy traffic during rush hour, you can use this street here," Michael explained, pointing to a side road. "It's a bit longer, but it usually flows better." "Good tip. How long does the trip take on average?" "Outside of rush hour, about 20 minutes. During rush hour, it can take up to 40. "And what's the best time to avoid traffic?" "What time are Emma's sessions?" "They start at 2 in the afternoon." "Perfect. If you leave home at 12:30, you'll arrive with time to spare and avoid the heavy traffic." Ryan thanked him for the information and continued driving with the same dedicated attention. Michael was impressed with how quickly he had adapted to the demands of city traffic. When they returned to the driving school, Ryan seemed more confident and relaxed. The experience of driving in real traffic had been an important milestone in his adaptation process. "How do you feel now?" Michael asked. "Much better. I'll still need a few more lessons to feel completely safe, but I'm no longer afraid of driving to the hospital." "How many more lessons do you think you need?" "Maybe 3 or 4. I want to practice the route a few more times, and I'd also like to train for emergency situations." "Emergency situations?" "Like how to react if Emma gets sick during the trip, where to stop if we need quick medical help, things like that." Michael was touched by Ryan's concern. He wasn't just learning to drive, he was preparing to be the perfect caregiver for his wife. "We can simulate those situations," said Michael. "In the next class, we'll identify hospitals and health clinics along the route." "That would be perfect. Thank you very much for understanding the importance of this. Ryan, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. How is your wife dealing with the fact that you stopped racing because of her? Ryan was thoughtful for a moment. In the beginning, she felt guilty. She said I was throwing my career away because of her. But little by little, she came to understand that my decision wasn't a sacrifice, it was a choice. What's the difference? Sacrifice implies a loss. Choice implies a priority. I didn't lose anything by stopping racing. I just chose something more important. And does she accept that explanation? She does now, especially after I explained that having her in my life was already far more than any trophy could ever represent. Michael was moved by the answer. The way Ryan talked about Emma revealed a deep and mature love, based on companionship and mutual respect. How did you two meet? In university. She was studying physical therapy. I was just starting out in motorsports. We met at a party and talked the whole night about our dreams. And did you support each other's dreams? Always. She encouraged me to pursue a racing career even when no one believed I had a chance, and I supported her when she decided to specialize in neurological rehabilitation. Does she still work? She does, but she reduced her hours because of the treatment. She's an incredible professional, a reference in her field. It must be hard for her to accept being in the patient's position when she's used to being the one who takes care of others. Ryan looked at Michael with surprise. How did you know that? Intuition. People who dedicate their lives to caring for others often have a hard time accepting care themselves. That's exactly it. One of the hardest parts of this process has been convincing Emma to accept help. She always wants to take care of everyone except herself. And how are you dealing with that? Patience and a lot of talking. I try to show her that accepting help isn't a weakness, it's smart, and that taking care of her is an honor for me, not a burden. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Linda, who approached them with a worried expression. Mr. Thompson, sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that needs your attention. What is it? Do you remember Robert, that client who was taking lessons for his truck driver's license? He just called saying he had an accident. Michael felt his stomach turn to ice. Accidents involving students from the driving school were his biggest worry, both from a human and a professional standpoint. Is he okay? Michael asked immediately. He's fine, but the car isn't. He hit a pole trying to parallel park. He said he lost control of the vehicle. Where was it? On Sunset Boulevard near the mall. He's waiting there. Michael turned to Ryan. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cut our lesson short today. I need to resolve this situation. Of course, no problem. Can I help with anything? No, thank you. It's a routine situation, unfortunately. I hope the student is really okay. He says he is, but I'll check in person. Ryan said goodbye and left the driving school, leaving Michael worried about Robert's situation. Accidents were always complicated, involving insurance issues, liability, and, most importantly, an analysis of what had gone wrong in the teaching process. Michael went to the accident site accompanied by Linda. When they got there, they found Robert visibly shaken next to a car with a smashed front end. Fortunately, the accident had no victims, only material damage. How did it happen? Asked Michael, after making sure Robert was okay. I'm not really sure, replied Robert. I was trying to parallel park between two cars like you taught me, but when I shifted into reverse, the car accelerated on its own, and I hit the pole. Michael analyzed the situation carefully. Robert was a dedicated student, but he had always shown excessive nervousness during lessons. Probably the pressure of parking on a real street had caused confusion between the pedals. Did you mix up the brake and the accelerator? Asked Michael. I think so. In the heat of the moment, I couldn't think straight. It happens. The important thing is that no one got hurt. They sorted out the paperwork with the insurance company and the police. The accident was recorded as a student error, with no major legal complications for the driving school. But Michael was left thinking about what could have been done to avoid the situation. Linda, Michael said on the way back, I think we need to review our method for transitioning students from the practice lot to on-road lessons. How so? Robert showed nervousness during lessons, but I thought he was ready for the road. Maybe we should have done more preparatory sessions. Do you think it was our mistake? Not a mistake, but perhaps we can improve. Every student has a different pace, and we need to be more sensitive to that. The conversation with Linda made Michael think about Ryan. How different it was to teach someone with a natural ability versus teaching someone who struggled with their own reflexes. Each case required a personalized approach. When they arrived at the driving school, it was already getting dark. Michael decided it was time to head home and continue his new habit of having dinner with his family. But first, he wanted to review Robert's records to better understand where he might have identified signs that Robert wasn't suited for on-road lessons yet. "Linda, bring me Robert's file," Michael requested. "Of course. Are you going to review his progress?" "I want to understand if we missed any signs that he wasn't ready." Linda brought the folder containing all of Robert's lesson records. Michael analyzed every note, every evaluation, looking for patterns that might have indicated a need for more preparation. "Look here," Michael said, pointing to a note. "In the third lesson I wrote that he showed excessive nervousness during parking maneuvers, and here in the fifth lesson there's another note about anxiety." "That's true," Linda confirmed. "And yet he was cleared for on-road lessons, because he performed everything correctly from a technical standpoint. But maybe we should give more weight to the emotional aspect." "How so?" "Having technical skill doesn't mean being psychologically prepared. Robert knew how to do everything, but he wasn't confident enough to handle the pressure of a real situation." Michael's reflection was interesting. He was realizing that teaching someone to drive wasn't just a matter of transferring technical knowledge, but also about developing the student's confidence and emotional control. "Do you think we should change something in our method?" asked Linda. "I think we should be more discerning in our psychological assessment of students. Besides technical skill, we need to evaluate their confidence and emotional control." "And how do we do that?" "We can create controlled pressure situations during the practice lot lessons, simulate stressful situations to see how each student reacts." The idea was good, but Michael knew implementing it wouldn't be simple. It would require additional training for the instructors and possibly more preparation time for each student. "Let's think about this carefully," Michael finally said. "For now, I'm heading home. Tomorrow we'll discuss the changes." "All right, and Ryan? Will he continue his lessons as normal?" "Yes. In fact, he's a perfect example of why psychological assessment is important. Technically, he could have been driving on the road since the first lesson, but psychologically he needs time to adapt to the different mindset. That's an interesting perspective, and one that could help us avoid accidents like today's." Michael left the driving school thinking about the lessons the day had brought. Robert's accident had been a reminder of the responsibility he carried as an instructor. Every student who left his driving school took with them skills that could either save lives or put them at risk. At home, Michael found the family gathered in the living room watching television. He joined them but remained thoughtful throughout the evening, reflecting on the day's events and how he could improve his teaching methods. "Any problems at work?" asked Claire, noticing her husband's pensive mood. "A student had an accident today. Nothing serious, but it made me think." "Think about what?" "If I could have prevented it. If I should have noticed he wasn't ready." "You can't control everything," said Claire. "Sometimes accidents happen even with all the preparation in the world." "I know, but that doesn't mean I can't try to improve." Sophie, who was listening to the conversation, approached her father. "Dad, you always say that mistakes are opportunities to learn. Maybe that's what's happening." Michael looked at his daughter with pride. At 16, she already showed an emotional maturity that impressed him. "You're right," said Michael. "That's exactly what I need to do. Learn from what happened and improve." "And how will you do that?" asked Richard. "By rethinking the driving school's methods, maybe creating better ways to assess if a student is truly ready." "That sounds very smart," said Claire, "and it shows how much you care about your students." The conversation with his family helped Michael process the day's events more positively. Instead of feeling guilty about the accident, he was seeing the situation as an opportunity for professional growth. The next day, Michael arrived at the driving school with several ideas for improving student assessment methods. He had spent part of the night researching psychological techniques used in other areas of education and thinking about how to adapt them for driver training. "Good morning, Linda," Michael greeted. "I had some ideas about what we discussed yesterday." "What kind of ideas?" "We could create an emotional assessment system parallel to the technical one. Each student would be evaluated not just on skill, but also on confidence and control under pressure." "How would that work?" "We could create simulations of stressful situations during lessons, honking horns, sudden braking, unexpected situations, and observe how each student reacts." Linda seemed interested in the proposal. "And how would we measure that?" "With objective criteria: reaction time, quality of decisions under pressure, ability to stay calm." "Sounds complicated." "At first, yes, but it could revolutionize the quality of our teaching." They were discussing the details of the proposal when Ryan arrived for his third lesson. Michael interrupted the conversation to greet him. "Good morning, Ryan. How are you feeling today?" "Eager to continue practicing. Yesterday I told Emma about the lesson, and she was very happy." "And how is she?" "Well, she started a new round of chemotherapy, but she's excited because now she knows I can take her personally." "Great. Today we'll focus on special situations. Rain, heavy traffic, emergencies." "Perfect. That's exactly what I need." They headed to the car, but before starting the lesson, Michael decided to share his reflections on teaching methods with Ryan. "Ryan, can I tell you about a situation that happened yesterday?" "Of course." Michael recounted Robert's accident and explained his reflections on the importance of evaluating the emotional aspect of students beyond technical skills. "That's an interesting perspective," said Ryan. "In racing, psychological preparation is as important as technical skills, maybe even more so. How do you work on that in motorsports?" "High-pressure simulations, anxiety control training, concentration exercises, all to ensure the driver maintains mental clarity, even in extreme situations." "And do you think this could be adapted for regular drivers' education?" "Absolutely. In fact, I think it should be mandatory." Michael Thompson's ideas were validated by Ryan Mitchell's opinion, which encouraged him to move forward with the project to revamp the driving school's teaching methods. "Would you mind helping me develop these techniques?" asked Michael. "Your experience would be very valuable." "It would be an honor," replied Ryan. "Maybe we can create something that really makes a difference in traffic safety." "Exactly. That's what I'm hoping for." They began the lesson with a new dynamic. Instead of just practicing maneuvers, Michael created unexpected situations to test Ryan's reactions. During a turn, he simulated a loud horn. During a parking exercise, he called for an emergency stop. "How did you feel during these exercises?" asked Michael. "Challenged, but in control. My racing experience helps me stay calm." "And do you think students without that experience would react the same way?" "Definitely not. Most would panic." "That's exactly what we need to work on." For the rest of the lesson, Ryan and Michael developed several ideas for emotional control exercises. Simulations of hydroplaning, reactions to reckless pedestrians, quick decisions at complicated intersections. "You have a talent for teaching," said Ryan. "You should consider expanding the driving school." "Expanding how?" "Creating a specialized course in advanced defensive driving, or even emergency driving for healthcare and public safety professionals." The idea was ambitious, but Michael was intrigued. Ryan was right. There was a market for specialized training that went beyond simply getting a driver's license. "It's an interesting idea," said Michael, "but it would require investment and a lot of planning." "Anything worthwhile does, and you already have the foundation, a respected driving school and experienced instructors." "And would you participate in this project?" Ryan became thoughtful. "It depends on how things evolve with Emma. But yes, I'd be interested in contributing." The conversation was opening horizons that Michael hadn't considered before. Perhaps it was possible to transform his driving school into something bigger, a center of excellence for traffic education. When the lesson ended, Ryan was getting ready to leave when he received a phone call. From his tone of voice, Michael realized it was something related to Emma. "Is everything okay?" asked Michael after Ryan hung up. "Emma isn't feeling well. I need to pick her up from work." "Do you feel safe driving there?" With today's training, yes, thank you very much for everything. Drive carefully. And call me if you need anything. Ryan left in a hurry and Michael was worried. It was evident that Emma's situation was more delicate than Ryan let on. Times of crisis always test the resilience of those caring for the sick. During the afternoon, Michael tried to focus on work, but he couldn't stop thinking about Ryan and Emma. He had grown fond of the couple without ever having met Ryan's wife in person. "Mr. Thompson," called Linda, "are you worried about Ryan?" "I am. His situation is very delicate. What if we offered some kind of help, maybe some extra free lessons or some practical support?" "That's a good idea, but I don't know if he'd accept. Proud people like him usually prefer help disguised as a favor exchange." "What do you mean?" "Instead of offering help, we can ask for help. Like, ask him to help us with the defensive driving project in exchange for extra lessons." Michael smiled. Linda was right. Ryan was too proud to accept charity, but would probably be happy to contribute to a project he considered important. "That's a brilliant idea," said Michael. "Let's formalize the project and make a proposal to him." "You want to start this now?" "Why not? The sooner we develop it, the sooner we can help other students avoid accidents like Robert's." They spent the rest of the afternoon sketching out a basic project for an advanced defensive driving course. The idea was to create a program that combined traditional driving techniques with psychological preparation and emergency situation simulations. "What should we call the course?" asked Linda. "How about conscious driving?" suggested Michael. "I like it. It conveys the idea that it's not just about technique, but also about mindset. And we can offer different modules, basic for new drivers, advanced for professionals, and specialized for emergency situations." Ryan could coordinate the advanced module. "Exactly. He has the technical experience and the necessary credibility." When they finished the initial project outline, Michael felt excited about the possibilities. Maybe this was the moment to expand his vision for the business and turn the driving school into something truly innovative. At the end of the day, Ryan called Michael. "How is Emma?" Michael asked immediately. "Better. It was just a side effect of the medicine. It's already passed." "What a relief. And you? How did you feel driving to pick her up?" "Calm. The techniques you taught me worked perfectly." "Great. Ryan, can I propose something to you?" "Sure." "Linda and I developed a project for an advanced defensive driving course. I'd like you to review it and consider participating as a specialized instructor." Ryan was silent for a moment. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I think we can create something unique, something that really makes a difference in traffic safety. Send me the details by email. I'll review it carefully." "Perfect. And Ryan, this isn't charity. It's a professional partnership. Your experience would be fundamental to the project's success." "I understand, and I appreciate the clarity." After hanging up, Michael felt confident that he had found the right way to help Ryan while developing an important project. It was a win-win situation. Ryan would have a paid occupation compatible with his family responsibilities, and the driving school would gain a world-class instructor. That night, Michael came home with renewed energy. He told his family about the defensive driving course project and how Ryan could participate. "Dad, that sounds really cool," said Sophie. "You're creating something that can save lives." "That's exactly the idea." "And will Ryan accept him?" asked Claire. "I think so. It's an opportunity for him to stay involved with motorsports in a way that fits his current situation." "You've really changed," observed Claire. "Before you only thought about the driving school's profit. Now you're thinking about social impact." "Ryan made me realize that success isn't just measured by the money we make, but also by the good we do." "That's very beautiful," said Richard. Michael's family was proud of the transformation he was going through, and Michael felt grateful for having found a way to grow professionally while maintaining the values he had rediscovered. The next day, Ryan replied to Michael's email with an enthusiastic yes. He had reviewed the project overnight and was impressed with its scope and potential impact. They scheduled a meeting to discuss the details and began working together on developing the course. The partnership flowed naturally. with Ryan contributing technical expertise and Michael with pedagogical knowledge and business experience. "We have something special here," said Ryan during one of the planning meetings. "This could revolutionize the way people learn to drive. And it could start a new phase for the driving school," added Michael. "For both of us, actually. For me, it's a way to stay in the automotive world without abandoning my family." The partnership between Michael and Ryan was developing into something much bigger than either of them had initially imagined, and this was only the first part of a journey that would transform not only their lives, but also the lives of hundreds of future students. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you are watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Michael's transformation was genuine? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you very much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.